here. It is the new year, 2021, and we've all been waiting for it, right? So, this is the ASMM's Digital Small Business Connections. We're the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. The idea is each and every week, we want to give you something that you can walk away with and put to work in your business or your life. And if you're a small business owner, your business and your life, they're just they go hand in hand. They just go together. So that's how that works. I want to remind you guys that we are streaming live. I tell you this because it's a perfect opportunity to ask questions. If you have questions, you can ask it of our guests right on. You can leave a comment. I'll see it. I can pull it up on the screen and I can ask our guests. So it's a great way to do that. Today we have Nicole Hamilton, but before I get started with Nicole, I want to tell you this month, the rest of the month, all of our videos for the next 4 weeks are recorded. I recorded them. We have a lot of great people coming up. I have Chris Brogan coming up, I think, next week. I have Brian Lobig coming up. I have this wonderful guy, Justin, I met on Twitter. He happens to be a podcaster, and he's talking about how podcasting doesn't have to be brain surgery. So all of that's coming up and is recorded, unlike most of our episodes. This one today is live. So let me go to Nicole. If we mess it up, you will see, right? Because it's live. Hi, Nicole. How are you? So, Nicole, I have to point out, can you scoot your head over and let's look at the tree behind you? Do you see who did this? Is it a painting?
It's a print, and it was given to me and my husband by his sister Debbie. Okay. And it's enormous. It's
amazing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and then you can see a building reflected in the
yes.
Setting. That's the building across there.
Okay. Yeah, it's lovely. I like that.
Thank you.
So you own a company called Homeownering. Can you, before we start, talk a little bit about your company and what you do? Because you have a huge passion for mortgages. We talked about that before. So talk a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, so Homeownering came out of a previous company that I owned called Tactile Finance, which made software to create transparency for consumers in the mortgage process. So it was presenting home loans with no fine print in a format that could be easily compared. And we sold that software to banks and nonprofits. And then I wound that company down and really realized that I really wanted to spend time with consumers themselves. So I started Homeownering, and it's around the simple concept of a safety net for which is often someone's largest decision. Certainly financial decision is a mortgage, buying a home or refinancing, and to provide software and tools that allow anyone to operate on a level playing field with banks that serve them. So giving them all the insider information, but around a way that you don't have to learn a lot. So no one wants to learn about mortgages except me.
Right.
Right. It's basically on consumer research. You want the very best deal, and you don't want to get, in any trouble, and you want to have a good financial future, but you want it to be effortless and easy and all that. So we answer all the questions. We're an independent entity. We have no relationships with any financial institutions or banks. It's just, distilling really important information to people buying homes and refinancing in a way that they can really get big results from.
I love that you do that, and I love that you just say it right out there, which is people don't want to do all the research.
No.
And it is your biggest purchase, so it does seem like something you might do, but I will tell you, I haven't done it. We just bought this house this year. I'm not sure what I knew and didn't know going in. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's the reality is that, you can have the debate whether renting or owning is smarter, but the reality is that tremendous wealth in this country has been built through home ownership, especially in the middle class or, middle upper class and even lower class. And it's a huge driver of net worth and wealth, intergenerational wealth. So that's kind of another aspect of it that's super important and warms my heart or drives my passion, that you can really help people create wealth if they're smart about their money with home ownership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about business. I'm really curious about this. You said we're going to talk about simplifying a business versus boiling the ocean. So can you talk a little bit about what you mean there?
Yeah, so that really came from, so let me just give you a bit of background. So I've been in the technology industry for many years, in various industries, medical devices, cell phone technology. And then when I started my company in 2012, Tactile Finance, it was sort of like this desire to solve a problem, right? So if you're coming into business to solve a problem, you can solve a really big problem and you can sort of try to solve all the problems. But as I've matured as a business owner and operator, there's just an elegance and a power in really sort of niching down and finding the most powerful kernel of that problem to solve, which is an incredible learning for me. So I guess that's how I look at it. My first company, I really, we made very elaborate software. We, we're serving several different industries. It wasn't as effective in all of those places, and it was a tremendous effort. And I really worked like 18 hours a day, and we had a big development team, and we were just trying to do all of these things, and then taking a step back and sort of maturing as a business owner, you realize that you're not having as much impact as you could if you just focused, on the most impactful parts. And that's kind of when I launched Homeownering. It's just focused on this little kernel, which is, how do you get the most value for someone who's getting a mortgage in the least amount of time? And
Right,
that's
right.
a much smaller box than, and then serving everyone, endless information about every permutation of mortgage and, every comparison for every type. It's just like that was a different, but I think that's sort of maturity too, as well as, just having lived through certain business, adventures.
Right, right. And it's actually something that I've thought a lot about. So one of the things we work with, so we do digital marketing, and there's several industries, but we will work with people who will work with plumbers or electricians or different home service companies. And then once in a while, you'll find a home service company that brings in 10 different areas of home service and they handle it all. And you seldom see that work well. And once in a while, there are people who do that and do it well, but because they don't have that one thing that they're like, we're really good at this one thing. The ones who do it well, even if they have 10 people or 10 different industries they're serving, is that the ones who know exactly what they're doing. So we have one company, they're like, our whole point is safety. So yes, we're plumbers and electricians and um, chimney and all of these things rolled into one, but all of that is because we're delivering safety to a client. And I'm like, okay, so that does give you that. So I think you do have to boil it down, even if you have a lot of services. It's all got to boil down to one thing.
Yeah. And I know there are many examples of companies that have lots of, of different things, but I guess, I guess the takeaway is, where are you going to be most impactful and how much time and energy and bandwidth and, can you deliver to be most powerful and valuable in that way?
Right.
I think for a lot of people, especially small companies, the answer is that it's best to focus on a smaller chunk and
Right,
do it
exactly.
extremely well. If
Yeah.
I had, 100-person or 1,000-person company, we could maybe do a lot, but it's not the path that I want, and it's not effective, for the resources and the impact that I want to have.
Right. No, that makes
Yeah.
complete sense. It really does. It really does. So one of the things we talked about before we went on air is that many companies, and I've been reading a book called How I Built This by Guy Raz, and one of the chapters in there talks about, should I do it on my own or should I have a partner, right? And you and I talked about it a bit because neither of us have partners in this. Um, And that book says, oh, well, many of the most successful companies start with partnership. So I'm curious on your take on when it's a good idea, when it's not, and how you decide that.
Yeah. So I've been in the startup scene in New York City, for many years, and I've seen a lot of companies and have a lot of friends in startups and companies of various sizes. And I've always been envious of those that have a really strong partner, because what a great way to go through what's a very can be tumultuous and stressful experience as a business owner, than having that person at your side who thinks the same, maybe has complementary skills to yours, but you share this great mission and vision, and can bounce ideas back and forth with, who's really a true partner.
Right.
When I started my first company, Tactile Finance, I did not find anyone who was super passionate about mortgages and wanted to create transparency, for consumers and sell software to banks and nonprofits. Like, I didn't really find that person, but I have worked with many people who, UX designers and developers who, acted as that, but not on an equal ownership footing. So I guess I've
Right.
tried to find, the benefits of a partner, but without having found that person who would be in the journey with me. Um,
Right.
so I guess it's something I've always yearned for, even in my company now, is, that kind of a partner. But I've also seen some terrible situations where, you kind of get to a certain juncture in the journey, and, your visions, divide, and it's either, one of those moments where, it's a stressful event, maybe the company's not making as much money and someone wants to take it in one direction and the other. And that can be a real problem, in company structure and company stability, and all kinds of things like that. And also heartbreaking. I've seen some heartbreaking things. So I guess my ranking of, how to look at partners in business is, at the very top is that person who's got the exact same vision, as you. The middle is sort of where I am, which is, always trying to find people who, can really, support you, and you can bounce ideas off of, but you don't have that perfect match. And then the sort of the worst case scenario is when you have, like, the partner that's really not helping the business. Your relationship isn't really as functional as it should be, and then it
Right.
creates all kinds of problems. So it's a
Yeah.
tricky situation. I guess it's in some ways like finding a life partner. Sometimes you have a great
Absolutely.
marriage, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't never find that person, and that's fine too. And sometimes you have a bad marriage, and that's
Right. Yeah. And actually,
scenario.
it's funny you say that, because so I own the digital marketing company, but I have been working on another venture, and I called a friend. We've been friends for 25 plus years. And I called her and said, hey, I think you should do this with me. I think we should do this together, but let's come up with a partnership agreement first. And so we met with an attorney, and we're trying to come up with, and the partnership attorney said, look, this is very much like a marriage. And so you have to have a prenup. What happens when this ends? How do you want it to end eventually? And what do you do? How do you walk away from it? It was a really interesting way to look at it, I thought.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that's
So,
smart. It's similar to, prenup in marriage, where that can make the road much smoother in the event of issues. If you never have issues, you don't ever need that agreement.
right, exactly, exactly. And then, you said something good, which is you can be in the middle there. You don't have to necessarily have a partner who is there with you all the time. But if you have someone who takes ownership in your business, on a, ownership in air quotes, right? I have Anastasia in my office, and she came in very early, 8 months after I started this business. And she talks about our business as though it's our business. And I love that. And actually, I've
Yeah.
been very lucky in that most of the people I hired take that same sort of ownership, which does take some of the burden off of me when, when COVID hit and I was like, oh my God, what do we do now? And we came together and said, it'll be all right. We're going to survive. And these are the things we're going to do. It's easy if you've got a team that you build that maybe you don't have a partner, but if you've got people who work with you or for you who have that ownership, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, and similar to the family analogy or marriage analogy, it's like, the culture that you create, can be such a beautiful thing in your own company. And, if everybody feels supported and useful and they're giving their potential, and, it's a
Right.
very well functioning model,
Exactly. Exactly. So I want to talk a little bit about funding because clearly funding is a thing that you live in, right? This is an area you live in because you've got the mortgages, but you've had to deal with funding for businesses on a couple of different levels with two different businesses. So can you talk a little bit about that, the pros and cons of different funding?
Yeah, so it's also something I've thought about a lot. And again, like partners, seeing a lot of different sort of companies in different funding models. So just to give you a little bit of my background, I funded Tactile Finance with angel investor money. So it was angel investors who specifically invest in companies such as mine. So they're experienced, accredited investors. And that was beautiful. And I appreciate every single one of them who, took a bet on me and my company and, put their money in. Um, but it also at the same time, anyone who's been down that road sort of in the startup land community where the next step is really getting Series A, Series B, you're on that trajectory. The expectation that you have to play, the world that you have to play in is one where you truly believe that your company is going to be $1 billion company, right? And I
Right.
think, when you start off, you absolutely think like this big idea is going to be $1 billion business. It can be. You can map it out, with
Right.
the hockey stick model, and it's like it's convincing because there's so many people who need mortgages and so many consumers and all this. But you have to play in that realm, So if you go along the journey and you're not on that trajectory anymore, it's kind of like game over.
Right.
And the reality is that most businesses never make it to that, obviously. And so it's sort of like a wah, 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 and then,
Right.
and then you've lost control of your business and you've disappointed all your investors. And it's extremely time consuming because it's a relatively small knit community of investors in that world, and you get to know a lot of them and they get to know you. And so there's a lot of stress, and it's almost like having a second job to go that route. Especially as a solo founder, it was like white hot stress, sort of
Yes.
going down that route. And the other thing I'll say, so it's a great path to build a very large business, if you're going to go for it. And it was fun too. I mean, there's fun aspects of that.
Right.
But the way I started initially was an SBA loan, which I think is like the hidden gem of entrepreneurship, to be
Oh,
honest.
yeah.
I had a $60,000 SBA, or maybe it was less, maybe it was 40, but anyway, it seemed like a lot of money, and it was. And then you pay it back. It's personally guaranteed, so it's not something that you can, decide that you don't have the money to pay. You have to pay it back. So it's a personal guarantee, but anyway, so that was, I think, a beautiful way because there's super low interest rates, and
Right.
I think even now it's even lower. So that worked for me. I know it's not for everyone, but it was definitely a great way to get to a certain point in business and then raise more capital.
Right.
But the second time around, I just frankly had it with the whole investment sort of model that, there's a lot of flaws in the big shooting for the stars startup model. Not only that not many companies get funded, but then, if you're really committed to I'm really committed to this idea. It wasn't like it was a fling that I was having, and like,
Right.
then you're not on that trajectory, and then you have to sort of, consider the options. This is a lifelong passion that I have. So it was like, sort of destroying that, sort of forward momentum to pick that path. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So when I started homeownering, it was just about like, growing it to like a $10 million business, which is a
Right.
wonderful, beautiful thing. But no one in a startup community would ever invest in that because, it's just not the structure that, they're working in.
Right.
So it was more about just, profitability and, the sort of the boring old, growing it organically was just really appealing, mainly because it's a huge passion of mine, and I did not want to be beholden to a system where I could fail. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it sort of took me through all three. So I think for practical application, I would say if you're shooting for the moon and you really want to build a big business, absolutely go for the big dollars.
Right.
I think everybody, if that's your vision, that's the engine that's going to get you there. You're not going to get there. Very rare occasions do you get that big with just organic growth. It does happen,
Right.
very rarely. And then, SBA loans are kind of a neat thing because, you can do these super low interest to get yourself to a certain point where you might become profitable or get
Right.
investment. And then, obviously from the beginning of time, people have chosen the path of organic growth. Like that's
Right.
It's not as sexy, as raising, $5 million from VCs, but it's got many, many benefits.
Well, and it's much less stressful.
Yeah.
It's not, I think about that. I started this little business and I started it with a business card and a computer,
Yeah.
right? And I'm
Right.
like, and my husband's like, what is your goal? And I'm like, well, I needed 2 clients to be able to pay for the job that I left. That's
Yeah.
all I needed. And then I needed some more clients to do the things that I wanted to do for our house or whatever it was. And then once I kind of had my feet really dug, on firm ground, now I'm here and it's like, okay, now I can build. And I
Yeah.
think it's okay. It's so hard when you're starting there though, that a lot of people feel like we talked about this with Kate Chernus. You often think that you have to do something. You have to. Well, what
Yeah.
do you have to do? You don't have to have investors unless you really have that big goal. You don't have to go out and get a loan unless you really need it because you're not going to be able to start the business without it. If you're going to have to buy inventory, yes, right? You may need to do that. So
By the way,
it
I love
really
Kate.
depends on who you are. You love Kate? Yes,
I know
she's
Kate.
great.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know you knew her.
I,
I
I
love
think
her.
she connected us actually.
Oh, okay, yes,
So
I love
shout
her.
out to you, Kate.
She's great. She's really great. So actually, she was probably one of my favorite interviews in 2020 because I'm just amazed by what she's grown. And the same as I'm sitting here, listening to you, I'm thinking, gosh, you're a lot like Kate. Look at that. She went through the same things. So
Oh,
yeah, exactly, exactly. So all right, let's talk a little bit. You put this on the list of lessons learned on my second go around, and I'm gonna start it by telling you a little bit about my family. I have two older kids. They're 24 and they're 26, and I have a 14-year-old. My life with my 14-year-old is so different than my life with my 24 and my 26-year-old. And his whole childhood was different because I learned so much those first times around. The first 2 times I did certain things. The next time I'm like, much more laid back, right? So, what are some of the things that you found, lessons you learned on the second go around?
well, I guess one to your point. I mean, that's a beautiful story, and obviously illustrates, what I'm about to say, which is that you gain so much life experience, right, from
Right.
the process of being in business. And when people say, "I'm going to listen to my gut,"
Yes.
I don't know if you're a person who listens to your gut. I'm a person who listens to my gut. And the gut is informed by all of your experience. so,
Right. Right. Exactly.
so listening to your gut is really, listening to yourself having lived through all this experience and understanding. So I think, there's many aspects of, probably for you too, in parenting your first child, that were especially hard and didn't lead down the right path.
Right.
We were just talking about funding. So that was, incredible ride where I met some incredible people and I played with in the big league to some extent. It's very glamorous, the VC world, and
Right.
in that way. But listening to your gut, that's not. It's not ultimately wasn't satisfying for my business. So I guess I steered more into just respecting my own passion. Respecting my own knowledge that I gained. Sort of
Right.
listening to what I know because I had so much experience, through my first company. And even before that, I ran a consulting company. So, it's been a number of years. And so you just make different decisions. And I think ultimately you come up with your own blueprint. You're not following anyone anymore. You're thinking, you're taking all of these ideas and you're assimilating them into sort of, where you want to be in 10 years or where you think this business can grow. So that informed, as we already talked about, funding, sort of the other thing we talked about, which is sort of simplifying. You don't want that frenetic sort of existence where you're not making impact.
Right.
Like look
Right.
for that. You realize how satisfying those little kernels that you can make the impact are, and where are they? And I want more of that.
Right, exactly.
That's
I
what I
want
want
to
to do.
say something about what you just said that's interesting because there are tons of lessons that you learn from owning a business, right? And then if you go into a second business, then you learn them too. But I want to say, I think you can trust your gut. We should trust our guts because whether we've owned a business, whether we've worked in a different business, whatever, we still have experience going through, and we do have to trust our guts. When I first started this business, I'm trying to remember how far into it. It was a little over a year, I guess, and I went to California for a conference. And while I was out there, I met with a coach who works with people who do what I do. And he said, "Oh, no, no, no." He says, "Oh, and literally, sweetie, you can't do it that way. If you do it the way you're doing it, you're going to go out of business within a year." And at first I was like, I mean, actually, I literally felt like all my energy had just been drained from me. And I thought, oh, he must be right. He works with all these companies. And then I went back to the hotel room and sat there just completely drained. And then I was like, what the hell? No, this is my business. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I really think I can. And I didn't just do what I told him I was going to do. I doubled down on it. I'm like, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do more of it, and it changed everything for our business because I trusted my gut, right? So sometimes you feel like you don't have that experience, but trust who you are. I think trust who you are because especially if you have a passion for it, I really think you can do what you already believe you can do.
Yeah, I would say the one thing related to that is so when I was trying to raise a really big round of money from VCs, I made a point to really talk to the top tier, the A-list. And the A-list investors, never funded me, but I would say that they gave me amazing advice, right?
Right.
So it's like stuff you don't want to hear, but sort of unfolded that way. And so I guess in parallel to following your gut, it's also really great to speak to other people who have a different opinion than you, who are really, high quality, whatever that means, experienced people who have a different perspective, different objective, different set of experiences. And that has also really, really helped me, I think. Like
Yeah.
just that sort of exposure to ideas. And frankly, during COVID, like that's what I miss most is meeting people, forming connections with people. I mean, we're doing it here, right? So this is
Right.
lovely.
Yeah.
More, please. It's like
I honestly think I'm so lucky. I've had 108 guests since
yeah,
March.
this is
That's
beautiful.
108 business owners I've been able to talk to and learn from. It's been,
Yeah.
even if nobody else is getting anything, I am learning a billion things.
Yeah,
So
and
it's
you can
wonderful.
do it on Zoom, but like those sort of organic meetings where you meet someone who's in your industry or in a contiguous industry or related industry that you didn't know before, who has this particular perspective and knowledge, that is, a beautiful thing, And I don't think we have that as much right now. You don't.
Yeah,
You
I
kind of have to
agree.
make a real effort to say, hey, you want to Zoom?
Well, and I do want to say that. I mean, it's funny because you said in different industries. And so I just had a conversation this morning with one of my clients he's an auto shop, totally different industry than I'm in. But it's always interesting to talk to him because he's got a different point of view on business. And I very seldom walk away without going, oh, I could do that. That's something I could put to work in my business, or that's
Oh,
something I
yeah.
should be thinking about. So I think it's so important that I talk to people all the time who put themselves basically in their office, and that's where they stay. And they're like, I live in this space right here in front of me. And then they don't look outside, and they'll say, I'm an introvert. And I'm like, it's okay to be an introvert. You've definitely got to talk to other people though. I mean, I just feel like there's so much to learn out there. And even in that case with the guy who told me I couldn't do it the way I was doing it, he was wrong. But at the same time, he gave me his reasoning made sense. And so I was able to say, okay, I see where he's coming from,
Yeah.
but here's how I'll work around that.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this little anecdote, which may be applicable to other people out there. But so this one investor who didn't invest in me, he said, well, so I was a competitive swimmer, like on a top team, really hardcore when I was in high school for about 10 years.
Okay.
And so it was like this super rigorous competitive training, right? And
Right.
he said to me, he said, usually competitive athletes make their businesses harder than they need to. And I keep thinking about that all the time because it's like so it's like this random thing. It was like a sentence. That's all I remember from the
That's
meeting with
really
him.
interesting.
I think about it for years after because that goes back to like the complexity. Like just because you can handle a really hard thing doesn't mean you need to make it really hard.
Right,
You
exactly. And
know?
just because you can work 18 hours a day doesn't mean you should.
Right. And it doesn't get you closer to your goal to make like this
Exactly.
huge complicated thing. It's not going to get you where you want to go, which is really making impact.
Right,
I
right.
mean, in
Is, is
exchange
there
for money.
anything is there anything this time around that you're like, other than the financing, which is a pretty major thing, but is there any small thing that you look at and you're like, I love this part of it so much more now that I'm doing it this way?
Was really I mean, this is a basic thing that everyone needs to do, but just the focus on the consumer, the
Right,
joy in that, the connection to them, making them happy, making their lives better.
right,
That's the part that I love most. It's like, how can I please them? How can I surprise them in wonderful ways? How can they feel good? Like a mortgage is a very, very stressful process. Usually people feel terrible because they're being told that they don't make enough money, that
right.
their credit score, where's my finger? credit score isn't the credit score isn't good enough. There's all these things like you can't have what you want, except
Right.
if you do make a lot of money and then, everything's gravy. Um, So during that process, just that to provide, like, it's okay, like, you're fine, you're going to get there, you're going to get all the help you need, you're going to make it through, and you don't have to feel bad about yourself.
Right.
You're going to build something great for yourself, and you're going to do it in a smart way. And I think there's a lot of inflection points in those types of things that are stressful that we as business owners can create a better, it sounds so cheesy, but a better world,
Right.
like,
Well,
we can make an impact and create that connection for yourself, which is,
absolutely.
again, so important, especially in this COVID world where, we're all isolated in our little pods.
Well, and I think I love that you said that, focusing on the consumer, because I think so often we kind of lose that focus, right? We lose it, and then we forget what's important to them, and we forget how much a small thing is going to change how they feel. I mean, it's a stupid example, really small little example on our end. It is unbelievable how stressful it is when we ask our clients about their passwords for social media. The stress that they feel immediately it's crazy. And we have been able to simplify it for them just by simply telling them, you know what? Everybody thinks they don't know the password. Try the first thing and it's going to be right. And if it's not, it'll be the second thing. It's always the case. And as soon as we tell them, you can see them go and just kind of relax. And it's such a small thing, but it takes that little bit of stress off of them, right?
Yeah,
So it's
totally.
great. Yeah, it's great if you can
Yeah.
do that but just remembering what they're feeling. You said remembering that they feel bad about themselves for whatever reason. You know what? We've got to move on to another subject, because this was one we wanted to focus on a lot. The A/B testing. You said you've been really focusing on this lately and getting results. So talk a little bit about how you're doing that.
Yeah, so A/B testing, there's lots of resources out there. What does it mean? So what it means to me is, if you have a digital business or you're doing anything online, you can obviously A/B test anything that's not online too, in various
Right.
methods. But I'm talking specifically about your website, your marketing, your messaging, all these things. So with my first company, I knew that I needed to do this, and we did some of it. We did a lot of user testing, UX testing. We didn't do a lot of like A/B testing. And I think the subject was too overwhelming, like, to really understand. I thought it was something you really need a lot of resources for, or, some expert to help you with what does it mean? What does it encompass? and,
Right.
and then I figured, like, and now the way I run my business is by A/B testing, and it's so simple. And the concept is, and you can do this with Facebook, or you can do it with Google Ads, or you can do it with people, just regular people. But the concept that I've laid out for myself is testing messages, testing headlines via like Facebook ads with a plain background. So there's no variables, right? So you're just
Right.
testing 5 different messages and seeing which one resonates with your particular customer group. And then once you get that, it's just so simple. Why not test your messages to know what resonates? So easy. Once you get that, then you can change like the background in the video or a photo with 5 different photos, in the same message. So then it's
Right.
just like this very easy path where you can. And then on web pages that you create one variable on a web page, and then using those ads, you can drive traffic to them. You can look at mouse flow, and just that one variable may change the click-through rate, or the, who calls you for an appointment.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Or how do you get them to the next step? And it's just this and I guess in my last company, I thought, this is so unbelievably complicated. It's going to create so much stress for me. I'm just going to do, testing with a little bit of, users, and I'm just go by your gut, right?
Right. Right.
Sort of iterate that way. But what's interesting about A/B testing and the way that I use it now is that it's incredibly freeing, because it's not time consuming. It's literally taking these little steps and little incremental changes that you are validating with qualitative and quantitative information to drive you in the right direction, and it actually frees you up to do other things, because you're not thinking about like, I'm making the 40th, the 40th permutation of my website now.
Right, exactly.
You don't need to, because if you just follow this process, if you do it once a month, by the end of the year, you may have increased your conversions by like 400%, without having applied any of this time wasting effort. So I guess
absolutely.
So that's a really simple process to use. I just described using Facebook ads, but you could use anything that drives people to a message or a website and gets some concrete result, such as a click, that validates whether one is better than the other. So you could,
right.
It's super simple.
It is. And it's funny, you can use it for, we were working with a manufacturer that manufactured this thing that nobody in the world knows what it is. They all use it. It's on everything that you use ever. I mean, pencils, pens, if I picked up anything on my desk, somehow it's being used. But nobody understands it. Nobody knows what it's called. And so it took us the longest time to get them to understand that we had to say things in a way that people would understand it. And that's exactly how we did it, is using A/B testing. Why don't we try it this way and see if somebody clicks through to your website? If we use the word you want us to use, is anybody going to click through? They just didn't, because they had no idea what that was. But then if you used different words to get there, they would. And it made an enormous difference. It was a night and day difference for them. And because before they said, we can't use digital marketing at all. It's just because you're using it wrong.
Yeah. The interesting thing too is that it frees you from actually feeling bad about yourself, because like you think like, is my marketing strong enough, right?
Right.
Who the frick knows,
Right, exactly.
You don't really know, but but you yourself can generate probably 30 different taglines for your business, right?
Right.
Because your business, and even if you make 12, out of those 30 taglines or 12 taglines, pick 5, right?
Right.
Pick those 5, test them, and then you get your result, and you use that result, and you don't have to guess, and you're the one that generated all those, or do it with a partner, or do it with someone else, a consultant or whoever. But then you take those, and then over the course of time, you're going to think of other ones, on your own as you work with customers and you figure out what they're interested in. You just test those too. And it's kind of like this, it just relieves the sort of stress of marketing, and also I think cuts down on the dollars that are wasted, because you're not spending money in areas that you shouldn't, and you can spend money in areas that you should.
Absolutely. All right. So we talked before we got on about books, about your favorite books, and how much books mean to you. So you do exactly what I do. You listen to one and you read one at the same time. So let's talk about what you're listening to right now.
So I'm listening to Grant, which is a biography of Ulysses Grant by Ron Chernow. It's a very well-known, popular biography. And it's 48 hours on Audible, so I think I'm into hour 40, so I've got quite a bit to go. So I listen to that, and it's just fantastic. It's,
So I'm curious, can I ask you a question? Because I know what I do to listen to books. How do you get in time? Because people are like, how in the world do you have time to listen to 40 hours of a book?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
So I have a family. I have 2 teens and 2 dogs, one of which is a very large Labrador puppy. So I don't have a lot of, sort of quiet time at home, let's say. So what I do is I have these wireless headphones, and I put them in with a headband around my head, and everyone knows that when I have that on, I'm listening to
above your head that says, "Don't disturb me."
I'm listening to my book and I have to like touch it, to turn it off. And I say, just a minute. And I turn it off, But I do a lot of cooking, especially during COVID. There's just a lot of cooking, walking around. I like to walk quite a bit. So I do it in all those spaces where you're doing tasks that are, conducive to listening to a rather heavy biography on a historical figure. But the interesting thing about that book is that, it covers this very tumultuous period in U.S. history, which is, the sort of early mid 1800s, which I'm in now, sort of pre-Civil War through Civil War, into the later times, I guess, when he becomes president. I would assume that's covered in this book.
Right. Eventually.
But, we're living in a tumultuous time, COVID and the whole political stuff that's going on right now. And to sort of have that, that other historical perspective of another time has been just very, it's even things out for me in the long tail of history, of the United States. And it's not even that long ago.
Right.
It's been a comfort in a weird way to sort of go into that world.
Well, and interestingly, you said you're reading Path to Power about Lyndon Johnson, which was also a tumultuous time.
Yeah.
Did you choose them both knowing that? Did you choose them both thinking about that? Or was it just after you started that you went, oh, look at that?
Well, so I had read Robert Caro's book on Robert Moses. So that's an amazing book as well. And Robert Caro is interested in power. And he writes very long books, which are incredibly descriptive. And it's like he's taking you into that world. And so this book, Path to Power, is actually the first of 4 volumes on Lyndon Johnson.
Oh my gosh.
It only covers up to when I think he becomes a congressman. I'm not sure, but I'm in the middle of the first volume, which is 700 pages. I'm halfway through. But the beautiful thing is that I'm in the Depression era. So that's also, similar to today in a lot of ways with the economic destruction that's happening and terrible, poverty that we're having and, all these things. So that's been really interesting to be in that world as well as the world of Ulysses Grant.
Right, exactly.
At the same time.
It amazes me. So I've been a reader since I was, I think people who are readers often remember their first trip to the library. They remember their first book. All of these things. Books have been huge throughout my life, but it still amazes me to this day that I'll pick up a book and it'll be about something that I think is completely really unrelated to me or what I'm doing. And I can look at it and go, oh, that's how that affects me. Yeah. That's how that had an effect on me, or that's how this is how I relate to this person in this book. So it's really books are a powerful tool for business owners because you can see those things. And they don't necessarily have to be a book that there's a lot of self-help or a lot of business development books, but these biographies are hugely powerful for that.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say my favorite business book is a book called Pitch Anything by Oren Klaff or Klaff.
Okay.
Klaff, I think, Oren. But anyway, it's a book on how to pitch a business. And the book itself, I don't know, it's maybe 200 pages long, but there's like 20 pages in the book that's worth the price of the book and more, which is it lays out a formula to pitch a business in a really exciting way in 20 minutes. And the beauty of this is that the book is about how small our attention frames are and how to make your pitch accurate and dynamic. And for anyone who's looking to pitch a business to a customer, to an investor, I highly recommend this book. You don't even have to read the whole thing, but it is a good book. And I've recommended it to many people. It's very well known, so it's maybe a lot of people have already heard of it, but it's so actionable. So you
That's
just take
great.
that book and use it, and you come up with something better than you would have thought of.
I love that. And I love, to me, it's any book, if you can get something, one thing out of it, Daniel, I'm actually looking over at my bookshelf. Daniel Pink talks about when, right? When all, and the one thing that sticks out of that book in particular, as a matter of fact, I'm having surgery this week. I'm having surgery Wednesday. The one thing that sticks out of that book is he's like, never, ever, 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 ever. And he uses the F word in it. And he says, never effing do this. Schedule your appointments at 1 or after for your surgery, because your surgeons are much more likely to make a mistake. So
Oh,
my
good.
surgery is scheduled at 8:30 a.m.
Good for you.
Because he said never ever. I'm like, okay, well, if he said it that clearly and that emphatically, then I'm listening.
You want to be first.
Right,
You don't
exactly.
want to
The
have
first one
eye
I want to.
strain or wobbly hands or
But isn't it
hungry.
funny?
You know, when your
Exactly.
surgeon is hungry and they can't focus as well.
Right. Oh, I'm horrible at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. As soon as he said it, I was like, oh yeah, no, I don't want a surgeon who feels like I do at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Ooh, you don't want a
So
sleepy surgeon.
exactly, exactly. Well, Nicole, this is so great. I'm so glad you came on today.
I
Oh,
thank you so much for having me. It was really a pleasure just to spend time with you.
it just occurred to me. You said, I'm so sorry that you said, I'm just doing this. You said Kate introduced me to you.
Yeah.
I was thinking I introduced you to Kate
No,
because
no,
I'm always doing
no,
that.
no,
But that's
for
how I met.
you.
Because I was like, so just like it's funny. 20 minutes later, that pops into my head. So
Yeah,
it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. And hopefully
no
one
fun.
day in the real world we'll get to meet.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I'm from
Yeah,
DC, so I'm sure we'll see each other.
exactly, exactly. All right, hold on 1 second. Let me remind everybody to please subscribe. Let me just say this: Nicole subscribed this morning.
I just
Uh,
subscribed. You guys all have to subscribe.
Exactly. It is a huge help. Anytime you're listening to a podcast, anytime you're watching it on YouTube, please do subscribe. It makes a huge difference to the person who is holding it. It's just a small way to get us forward and to maybe monetizing this at some point, but also to reaching more people. That's our
Yeah,
goal. So if you can help us out, thank you so much for
you're
that.
welcome.
So, and you can subscribe anywhere. You can do it on YouTube. You can do it on iTunes, wherever you are. Please do subscribe and leave us a review. We appreciate that as well. So, all right, Nicole, thank you so much for coming on. Everybody else, you guys will see me. I won't see you for the next month because I am taking that time off to recover from my surgery. But you'll have some great podcasts. So please do tune in. And I will see you in February. Bye bye.
Bye, guys.